Okay, for those of you who are taking a thesis seminar, this is a recap regarding some of the concepts that we talked about last week and some of the things you might want to be thinking about for this week. Last week we talked a lot about making sure that you updated your procedure section within your method section, making sure that you not only talk about your data collection techniques, but also discuss the way that you analyze the information, basically mentioning the codes and making sure that you include at the end of your thesis statement and the appendix the codes that you used, those categories, subcategories, and codes that you used, and make sure that you present that in an outline form. A final thing that you want to include in your procedure section will be any limitations of your study. So just one sentence or two describing any limitations that you had with regard to either your data collection techniques or the way that you analyzed your information. So if you do have any limitations, make sure that you do include those again within the procedure section, within the method section. Now last week we talked a lot about the results and discussion section and some key points to remember. Make sure that you do include the results first, that you first can distinguish between the two, between results and discussion. Results are your findings, that is the data, the information that comes directly from your data sources. Most of you are working with 3 different data sources. We want to try to triangulate the information to make sure that we include information from each of those data sources when we talk about any one concept, claim, or topic. So make sure that you try to incorporate at least 2, preferably 3 different data sources so that we are triangulating information. Make sure that the concepts that you present in your results and discussion section are organized in a logical fashion. And we talked a lot about that last week, about how to triangulate information around each of those topics. So if you do have any questions or doubts at this point, then we need to discuss those right away, preferably face-to-face. So feel free to come by my office if we still need to talk about that, if you're not sure about how you want to organize your information. Remember to make sure that you have a good balance between results and discussion, not to have too many results and not enough discussion, or vice versa. And that'll be something that I'll be looking at whenever I provide feedback this week as you finish for this Friday, May 16th. Now, going into next week, and some of you have been asking about this in your reflection, so I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about this, but we'll talk more probably next week about this, but talking about the abstract, introduction, and the conclusion. Now the introduction will be very much like the introduction that you developed last semester in your applied linguistics course. You want to begin with a hook, some sort of quote, statistic, maybe a question, but something that hooks the audience, that grabs their attention related to your topic. In the introduction paragraph, after you've created the hook, you want to present some sort of context, background, preferably mentioning the problem that you are addressing. So remember that any research project, just as you worked on last semester with your applied linguistics course, the same applies for this course. You need to develop and think about a problem that you are addressing. So in your introduction you want to discuss some sort of problem that you are looking at, and I would try to include at least 1 citation to back that up. So think of the problem that you are addressing with regard to not only your literature review but also your own research. And then you want to include at the end of your introduction a strong thesis statement. So the thesis statement will be at the end of your introduction, and this will be again very much like the thesis statement that you developed last semester. And so try to follow that same model. Look at your notes last semester, look how you created your own introduction paragraph last semester. It'll be very much like what to expect for this semester. So your introduction paragraph should be approximately 250 words, and try to include those 3 aspects: the hook, background or the context of the problem, and your thesis statement. Now the conclusion will be slightly different than perhaps what we worked on last semester, maybe similar to what you did in your literature review class. The conclusion paragraph will include 3 points. Think of the conclusion paragraph as including the past, present, and the future. So the past being some summary of your literature review. the very first sentence of your conclusion, I would again restate your thesis statement. So I would follow that same model as we did last semester. The first sentence of your conclusion, the thesis statement, then in a couple of sentences, review the literature that you talked about in your literature review, kind of summarize that. You want to then summarize your own findings with regard to the literature. Think about some future research that others could extend your knowledge base on what you learned from your own research and how they could take your research a step further, and any final recommendations that you want to include as well. Now the abstract is different than the introduction. The abstract is going to be approximately 150 to 250 words, and you want to include essentially all aspects of your research paper within that word count. So you want to begin by stating the problem. You want to mention the participants, the instruments that you used, and the procedure. So essentially the three aspects or the three sections of your method. You want to discuss your findings as well at the end, and also the way in which you analyzed your information. So again, you want to talk about the problem. You want to talk about the participants, instruments, and the procedure, the way in which you analyze the information, and your final results. All of that within 150 to 250 words. The abstract is the only paragraph in your document that does not include an indentation. All other paragraphs will include a half-inch indentation. So later, probably next week, we'll talk more in detail about your oral defense. Certainly if you have any questions about your oral defense, we can address those now, but I would rather focus on our results and discussion section, making sure we finish on time for this week, and clarifying any doubts, thinking in terms of next week, working on your abstract, introduction, and conclusion. If you do have any questions, feel free to send me an email in Canvas or come by my office and we can discuss it.